Trump critic and ex-GOP Congressman Adam Kinzinger reminded everyone that he is still far from redemption by regurgitating the same dishonest right-wing propaganda espoused by Marjorie Taylor Greene about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe and enjoy the video. All right, after a brief hiatus from canvassing in Wisconsin, we are back. We are pondering politics, and we got to talk about Adam Kinzinger. Adam Kinzinger is the former Republican congressman who, along with Liz Cheney, a former Republican congresswoman, served on the House January 6th Select Committee investigating Donald Trump for his role in inciting the January 6th insurrection. And I applaud the work that he did and the work that Liz Cheney did in having some degree of courage by standing up against the political currents of their party and their base by being willing to criticize Donald Trump. But because the Republican Party has become a fascistic cult of personality, and it took some measure of integrity for these two to defy their high priest, the high priest of that cult. And they suffered the political consequences. Now, I've been very careful not to regard them as heroes or to beatify them because they're not heroes. They did what is constitutionally considered the bare minimum. They put briefly country above party leader, right? Which is what any responsible civil servant should be doing. What they did was the political equivalent of not kicking a puppy or punching a baby while walking down the street. They didn't back a fascistic attempt to overthrow the government and want to hold the people responsible. It's sad that we live in a political environment where that gives you, that's worthy of note, but there we are. There are a lot of people on the left broadly, more moderates, that regard Kinzinger and Cheney as political heroes for doing this. Again, I don't, because I think they did the bare minimum. And recently, Adam Kinzinger, not to toot my own horn, but Adam Kinzinger, I think, proved me right by issuing this tweet about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, he's no longer in office. He declined to run for re-election, due in large part because of redistricting in his state, and also because he knew he would probably not win since he pissed off so many Republicans and conservatives by speaking out against Donald Trump in the January 6th Select Committee. But Adam Kinzinger is still a conservative. Okay, this is really, really important. He is no longer a congressman. He may no longer identify as a Republican, although I have no evidence that that's not the case. He's certainly a critic of the modern iteration of the Republican Party. But Adam Kinzinger is conservative. That is a fact. He's not liberal. He's not lefty. He's not a Democrat. He believes in things that are commonly associated with the Republican Party. And in terms of his voting record, when he was in Congress, he voted with Donald Trump when Donald Trump was in office, upwards of like 93% of the time, which is actually more often than people like Matt Gaetz, who is a card-carrying member of Colt 45, voted for Trump. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to establish here is, even though he criticized Trump, Adam Kinzinger is a Republican and he is a conservative, and he proved it by parroting this image provided by the Taliban. And the tweet says, the Taliban have released new pictures of some of the military equipment left behind in Afghanistan by the U.S. Army. And Adam Kinzinger says, this is an embarrassment. The Biden administration will always be marked by this disaster. And this is really frustrating for a variety of reasons. Number one, because Kinzinger has demonstrated some integrity in the past by being willing to buck the standard conservative Republican Party line. And he's also a veteran, right? So you would think he would know better than anybody that this is not the sole responsibility of the Biden administration. As a matter of fact, I would argue that the Biden administration is among the least culpable for this situation here. But before we get into that, I'll also point out that this is effectively the same sentiment expressed by Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone who hates Adam Kinzinger and who Adam Kinzinger seems to disrespect because, of course, she's an idiot and she's an avowed cultist. Joe Biden didn't just leave $85 billion worth of U.S. military equipment in his deadly, disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan. It was a gift to the Taliban, who murdered and maimed our soldiers for years. One of the most embarrassing betrayals ever. Biden should be impeached. Now, Kinzinger didn't call for President Biden's impeachment, so he didn't go quite as far, but he's essentially, they're sharing the same sentiment. And so if I were Adam Kinzinger, I would think, ugh. If Marjorie Taylor Greene is thinking the same thing I am, I guess it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but it would give me pause, right? But the fact of the matter is, the reason I'm calling this out is because any comprehensive analysis of the withdrawal from Afghanistan has made it abundantly clear that this is not the sole responsibility of the Biden administration. And again, I think that comprehensive analyses make it very clear that it's not even primarily the responsibility of the Biden administration. So, and we've done a video about this before, but in February 2023, the Special Inspector General investigating the withdrawal from Afghanistan released a comprehensive report, hundreds of pages, detailing basically the history of the United States invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, our attempts to prop up the Afghan national government, and then the events that led to withdrawal. Remember, this is something that occurred under 4 administrations. We invaded Afghanistan under President Bush, a Republican. We stayed there under the 2 terms of President Obama, a Democrat. We stayed there under President Trump, a Republican. And then we finally left under President Biden, a Democrat. So 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats have presided over the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. It began with a Republican, and it ended with a Democrat. But even the Inspector General's report makes it very clear that there are multiple factors that contributed to the dilemma, the debacle that was our invasion, occupation, and withdrawal from Afghanistan. Certainly, it wasn't a shining moment of, U.S. foreign policy competence. But of all the single factors, the single biggest one was the Doha Agreement that was made by the Republican Trump administration in February 2020. It was a direct deal with the Taliban. They cut a deal with the Taliban to get out of Afghanistan by May 2021, all U.S. personnel. That was a decision and an obligation made by the Republican Trump administration to the Taliban. That was not Joe Biden's responsibility. That was not Joe Biden's deal. But it was the deal that Joe Biden was left with when he became president in January 2021. Okay? History is not an etch-a-sketch. That was a tweet that I saw in response to this, and I think that's great. Joe Biden, when he's inaugurated president, doesn't get a system reset. He doesn't get to revert to last save. He doesn't get a new game. He inherits the context of his predecessor. That's what every president does. When Donald Trump became president, he inherited good and bad, the context left for him by President Obama. President Obama inherited the context left for him by President Bush, and so on and so forth, all the way back to John Adams inheriting the context left for him by President Washington. You don't get a reset. You don't get a blank slate. Newly inaugurated presidents have to work in the context left for them by their predecessors. And what we had with President Biden was a situation where Donald Trump made a commitment to the Taliban. He withdrew U.S. forces from February 2020 to January 2021 from 13,000 down to fewer than 2,500. He gave the Taliban back. President Trump bullied the Afghan government into releasing 5,000 imprisoned Taliban fighters. He gave the Taliban back twice as many troops as he left Biden in terms of U.S. troops. So he left the good guys 2,500 troops, and he gave the bad guys twice that number of troops. And we want to talk about the equipment left behind? Well, the Special Inspector General's report dives into this. Since 2002, the U.S. spent approximately $19 billion arming and equipping the Afghan National Army. So the equipment that was left behind was not left behind under the Biden administration. It was given or sold to or loaned to the Afghan government. So it was Afghan property. It was made by the United States, but it was given, sold, or loaned to the Afghan government. And it was there for 20 years. It wasn't like it all just dropped under Biden. And just to put this in perspective, the size of Afghanistan, Afghanistan's about the size of Texas. So let's think about this. When Joe Biden becomes president, there are only 2,500 U.S. troops in a country the size of Texas, a hostile country governed by a weak, corrupt government that is falling to a domestic native insurgency. And that domestic native insurgency, the Taliban, was given twice as many troops as we had in terms of U.S. personnel, was given twice as many by the Trump administration. What the hell was Biden supposed to do? He was supposed to go with 2,500 people around a country the size of Texas and collect 20 years worth of equipment scattered across that country? Really? That didn't actually belong to him or to the United States? It actually belonged to Afghanistan? It's not practical, is it? It's not really it's not only not practical, it's really not possible. We would have effectively had to reinvade Afghanistan. We would have had to do a troop surge. That would have pissed Republicans off, would have pissed Democrats off, would have pissed the American public off, certainly would have pissed the Taliban off, right? Because one of the conditions in Trump's deal is that if we didn't get out, if we didn't draw down forces and get out, they would start shooting U.S. troops again. That was the only commitment. The Taliban was supposed to comply with like 7 conditions. Trump demanded 7 conditions of the Taliban. The Taliban only honored 1 of the 7, which is, hey, we won't shoot U.S. troops. The other 6, they didn't bother, honoring. And Donald Trump, the most corrupt and incompetent president in modern history, a malignant narcissist, a pathological liar, a serial philanderer, a guy who literally banged a porn star while his wife was at home with her newborn son, a guy who has never made a vow that he hasn't broken or violated. The one time this asshole actually, honors a commitment, it's a commitment to the Taliban. Trump honored all of his commitments to the Taliban while refusing to enforce the Taliban's commitments to the United States. But what would have happened if Biden inherits a situation like this and we're supposed to gather 20 years and billions of dollars worth of equipment that technically wasn't ours in the first place? What were we supposed to do? We would have had to do a troop surge. We would have had to send troops, thousands of troops back in, more than what we had at the time, because the Taliban had more troops than what we had at the initial point of the agreement, because Trump gave them 5,000 back. Trump arranged for the Taliban to get 5,000 fighters back, so we would have had to send even more troops in. It wasn't feasible. It wasn't an option. So this is something that's really frustrating that people like Adam Kinzinger regurgitate. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Biden administration made every perfect decision, that there isn't, with the benefit of hindsight, decisions that we should have made differently. But the fact of the matter is that President Biden inherited an obligation and a context left for him by a Republican Trump administration. And as the Special Inspector General report notes, the Department of Defense had noticed for years, since 2009, since President Obama. So President Obama's first term, his second term, Donald Trump's first term, and hopefully his last term, they've noted for years that there was very poor oversight and tracking of U.S. loaned, sold, or gifted equipment to the Afghan government. So it was something that was known about for years. Obama didn't fix it. Trump didn't fix it. But we're blaming Biden for everything? It just doesn't make any sense. It's a dishonest and ignorant line of attack, and from somebody who was a veteran and a civil servant. He should know better. So this is proof, as far as I'm concerned. Adam Kinzinger, again, kind of like, give credit where it's due. I respect the fact that he was able to do the bare minimum and step up finally, after voting for him twice, by the way, because he voted for him in 2016, he voted for him in 2020, and he helped enable him along the way. Adam Kinzinger finally, in the 11th hour, decided, holy crap, this Donald Trump guy is a fascistic, cult of personality, incompetent loser. Maybe we should not yield to his fascistic attempts to take over the government and become an unelected dictator. I'll give him some credit for that, but this is not a darling of the left. He's not an ally. He is, at best, an ally of convenience, and we have to remember in the end what he is. When he's regurgitating bog standard, dishonest, disingenuous Republican apologia and propaganda, the same shit that's literally being said by Marjorie Taylor Greene, you've lost the plot. So just remember who he is, and use him when and where we can, and then discard him when he's not useful. Remember, he's not on our side. He is at best an ally of convenience. Hey you! Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.